John F. Kennedy was the picture of American vitality. He projected youth, health, and endless energy to a public that expected their commander-in-chief to be physically unstoppable. Behind closed doors, his medical chart read like a clinical encyclopedia. He suffered from severe spastic colitis, Cushing syndrome, Addison's disease, and crippling chronic back pain. That chronic pain required multiple failed surgeries, forcing him to wear a rigid back brace just to stay upright. In 1963, during the infamous motorcade through Dallas, that same brace locked his posture in place, preventing him from ducking after the first shot. Kennedy is a severe example, but he is far from the only one. Throughout U.S. history, presidents have actively hidden debilitating conditions, strokes, and terminal cancers from the very people who elected them. The most closely guarded secrets in Washington rarely involve military codes. They are often medical files, proving that administrations will routinely prioritize optical stability over the biological reality of the president. Before the 20th century, the most imminent threat to a president's survival wore a medical coat. Primitive theories and absolute ignorance of germs turned minor ailments into death sentences. In 1799, George Washington developed a severe sore throat. His physicians, operating under the theory that they needed to balance his bodily humors, drained 32 ounces of his blood, forced him to vomit, and applied blisters to his neck. He died after several days of this medical torture. Fast forward to 1881. President James A. Garfield was shot in the back by a disappointed office seeker. The bullet created a 3.5-inch wound and settled in a relatively benign location in his abdomen. Had doctors simply closed the wound and let him rest, he likely would have survived. Instead, countless highly respected physicians spent 3 months repeatedly searching for the bullet by digging into his wound with unwashed, gloveless fingers, expanding a small entry point into a massive 20-inch infection site that ultimately killed him. Before the discovery of germs and modern sanitary practices, a sitting president was often safer avoiding treatment than trusting his scientifically ignorant medical team. By the late 19th century, the medical threat shifted from sheer ignorance to extreme secrecy. At the start of his second term in 1893, amidst a massive economic panic, Grover Cleveland discovered a cancerous tumor in the roof of his mouth. Fearing a stock market crash if the public knew he was ill, he opted for silence. The administration organized an elaborate deception, disguising a major operation as a 4-day recreational fishing trip. Swaying back and forth in the waves of the Atlantic Ocean, a team of 6 surgeons heavily sedated the president. Over 90 minutes, they successfully extracted the tumor, 5 teeth, and a large portion of his upper left jawbone. They did all of this entirely from the inside of his mouth to strictly preserve his signature mustache, ensuring onlookers suspected absolutely nothing. The operation was completely successful and remained unconfirmed for decades. It also established a chilling precedent, an administration willingly risking the commander-in-chief's life in an unsanitary, highly compromised environment solely to protect political optics. Moving into the 20th century, the sheer weight of global leadership introduced a new kind of medical crisis. The immense geopolitical stress of the office began driving presidents toward fatal, heavily concealed lifestyle habits. Franklin Delano Roosevelt suffered from severe hypertension, bronchitis, and worsening heart failure. His medical team knew these issues were heavily aggravated by his chain smoking, yet the severity of his condition was aggressively suppressed. Despite his obvious terminal decline, his inner circle pushed him to run for a 4th term amidst the chaos of World War II. They prioritized continuous leadership and global stability over his impending collapse, which arrived as a fatal brain bleed in April 1945. That same crushing pressure plagued Lyndon B. Johnson. LBJ consumed heavy amounts of alcohol, food, and cigarettes to cope with the stress of the 1960s. During a famous interview, he explicitly rationalized his chain smoking, claiming the habit calmed his nerves. He argued it was physically better for his heart to smoke and be relaxed than to not smoke and be nervous, a philosophy that directly contributed to the massive heart attacks that eventually killed him. The modern presidency is an unrelenting pressure cooker. The intense demands of the job actively encourage toxic habits, turning the Oval Office into a biological hazard zone for the people who occupy it. The absolute peak of medical secrecy occurred in 1919, when Woodrow Wilson suffered a massive stroke, paralyzing his left side and leaving him nearly blind. Terrified that the news would destabilize the country, his inner circle completely isolated him. They locked him away, cutting the president off from the American public, the press, and even his own cabinet. With the commander-in-chief incapacitated, his wife, Edith Wilson, stepped into the void. She intercepted his paperwork, vetted cabinet requests, and made countless executive decisions herself. The administration's absolute terror of projecting weakness allowed an insular group to bypass the democratic process. For the remainder of Wilson's term, the United States was run by an unelected shadow leader. From balancing bodily humors with leeches, to ignoring lethal lifestyle habits, to hiding paralyzed leaders in bedrooms, history is littered with commanders-in-chief whose bodies failed under the extreme pressures of the office. Today, that level of darkness is entirely unacceptable. We expect strict medical transparency, demanding highly detailed annual health briefs from the White House physician. Following McKinley's death, the introduction of 24-hour Secret Service details and the requirement for public health briefings created a system of constant monitoring. Disappearing for 4 days to undergo secret surgery is a logistical nightmare when every movement of the president is tracked and documented by an embedded press corps. The biological stability of the commander-in-chief strictly dictates national security, with each medical update serving as an indicator of government continuity. As long as political power relies on the illusion of absolute, unwavering biological strength, the truth of a president's vulnerability will be treated as the ultimate threat to an administration.